Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this event hosted by Labour and Palestine, as streamed by Arise Festival, a timely event on Palestine, as we now have a Labour government who has come to power here in Britain. To briefly introduce myself, I'm Jess Barnard, member of Labour's National Executive Committee. I'm a trade unionist and a long-term international solidarity activist. I had the privilege of visiting Palestine on a young trade unionist delegation in 2022, where I saw for myself the apartheid system being imposed on Palestinians in the West Bank and the impact on the occupation on families for decades, on students, on workers, on trade unionists, and on young people's everyday lives. Today, we are meeting at a vital time for all of us interested in campaigning for Palestine, for humanity, and at the height of what the ICJ has termed a plausible genocide. All current signs are that even now, aggressions and human rights abuses against the people of Palestine are intensifying, clearly acting against the Palestinian people's right to self-determination. And in this context, it is so good to see so much support for the people of Palestine in the Labour movement and beyond, including through a lot of interesting work that Labour and Palestine have been doing. Over 20,000 people from over 650 constituencies have signed Labour and Palestine's petition to Labour's leadership on the need to support the international calls for ceasefire now. There's also a lot of vital campaigning going on, calling for an end to UK arms sales to Israel, including a new petition from the organisers of today's event, which will be posted in the chat. To quickly introduce Labour and Palestine, it's a platform launched at Labour Conference 2018, supported by ASLEF, CWU, FBU, NUM, TSSA, Unison, and Unite the Union. Today, we're delighted to have a range of speakers with us who will be putting the case that Palestine, more than ever, needs our solidarity and what we need from a Labour government now Labour are in power. There are no excuses. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker. So I'm very pleased to introduce Andy McDonald MP, who's a long-term campaigner in solidarity with the people of Palestine. Thank you, Andy, and over to you.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Jess, for that kind introduction. And thanks to Labour and Palestine for inviting me to speak this evening alongside the Palestinian Ambassador and for being able to say a few words on what the new government should do. We've been constantly bewildered and appalled by the terrible events we've witnessed over the last 9 months, more on social media than mainstream media, Al Jazeera apart, and staggered by the Conservative government in its response. And now we consider what the newly elected Labour government should do differently. I won't dwell on the harrowing stats that everyone on this call knows all too well. Suffice to say that the events of the past 9 months in Gaza have laid bare the disproportionate nature of the conflict, where one civilian population, that of the Palestinians, is routinely punished. And despite the majority of the world's nations offering solidarity to the Palestinians, the world's most powerful states tolerate and indeed assist Israel's subjugation of the Palestinian people. The principal task of a Labour government, in my view, is to shift the balance of power towards the global majority opinion, which supports the liberation of and justice for the Palestinian people in a peaceful settlement alongside Israel. And following the tragic killing of nearly 1,200 people on October the 7th, somewhere between 40,000 Palestinians, as documented by the Gaza Health Ministry and relayed by the UN, and up to 180,000, estimated by the Lancet, have been killed as a direct result of Israeli military action. The sheer scale of the Israeli response is one that has targeted and forced a whole people out of their homes many times over, directly into physical danger and at risk of death. Almost 2 million Palestinians forcibly displaced, 500,000 Palestinians at risk of famine, and more than half the buildings in Gaza damaged or destroyed. The global majority demand a ceasefire, as shown through the UN General Assembly, the ICJ has ruled that there's a plausible case of genocide taking place, and the prosecutor of the ICC has applied for arrest warrants for Netanyahu and other individuals. Meanwhile, Israel continues to receive armaments from America and Britain and other Western states. Israel continues to annex land in the West Bank, and America and Britain are yet to recognize Palestine as a state or give it recognition that the UN is a full member. And the Conservative government continued to license arms sales to Israel and refused the Labour opposition's call to publish its legal advice on arms sales, stopped the funding of UNRWA, intervened into the ICC arrest warrant application, and introduced new legislation to threaten protest rights. Labour's stated position clearly faced severe criticism over the past months and during the general election, including Keir Starmer's LBC interview, with which you're all familiar, and the refusal to vote for a ceasefire early on in the last King's Speech debate of November 2023. That remained a weight around our party's neck, and I heard that message loud and clear on the doorsteps during the election campaign. The reality, however, is that the front bench position did change and improve as pressure from the Palestine solidarity movement told. Labour has since opposed the anti-boycott bill, called for an immediate ceasefire and the restoration of funding to UNRWA. But what must Labour do now? This week, David Lammy met the Israeli Prime Minister and President, as well as the Palestinian Authority counterparts. A Foreign Secretary is bound to do so. He was clear this week in calling for an immediate ceasefire, hostages to be released, aid to reach the people of Gaza, an end to settlements and settler violence, and the need for a sovereign Palestinian state. But the question, of course, is how he will apply pressure to achieve its goals. Labour's policy background is clear. Its members have shown solidarity with Palestine, and the manifesto renewed our commitment to recognising a Palestinian state. The new government must act on these commitments. Firstly, before anything else, we must have an announcement of a ceasefire and the end to all military action. Britain must use all levers necessary to achieve this, including the end of arms export licensing as a first step. Secondly, we must see the ramping up of aid delivered into Gaza to stabilize the population. This includes requiring the opening up of all crossings and ramping up funding of UNRWA. Thirdly, Palestine must be treated as an equal partner in this conflict. It must be recognized as a state as the British Parliament voted for it in 2014. It must have full status on international bodies, including the UN, ICJ, and ICC. It must be recognized by the British government at the earliest opportunity. Fourthly, Britain must itself support the processes that will hold Israel and Hamas to account for war crimes and targeting of civilian populations, including through the ICJ and ICC, and that the UK will have no truck with the preposterous and utterly baseless notion proposed by the Tories in government that Israel has impunity for its actions in Gaza. We also need an end to land seizure in the West Bank and those lands restored. Our foreign policy must be based on human rights and the adherence to international humanitarian law, and the conviction of those who abuse human rights must be part of that. The end goal must be a sovereign Palestinian state alongside Israel. And I welcome this opportunity this evening to discuss these priorities with you. I also welcome the opportunity to hear from my good friend, the Palestinian Ambassador. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Andy. Thanks so much for taking time out to join us and for standing up for Palestine in Parliament. And as you've said, Labour must use the levers that we have to end the bombardment on Palestinians and to deliver a ceasefire. And as we know, without those consequences, whether it be diplomatic or ending arms sales to Israel, it continues to receive support from Britain and US, and it's so important that we pressure the Labour government to make sure that there is accountability and an end to the war crimes. I'm going to move swiftly on to our next speaker. It is a privilege to introduce His Excellency, the Ambassador for Palestine, Husam Zomlot, to give our main address for today. I know many on this call will have heard the incredibly informative and moving contributions from the National Palestine Solidarity demonstrations, and it's such a privilege to have him with us today. So thank you, Husam, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Jess, Hugh, Matthew, and all the team at Labour and Palestine for convening this rather very extremely timely conversation about the new government, what is expected, and how do we engage. And thank you for convening it early on, so we do not miss the opportunity of a change that has been promised by the new Prime Minister and by the new government. And I must say that the thanks are not just for convening this important event, but for your work over the last 9 months and over the years that has fruited in the election day and fruited before it and after it. And Palestine has factored and has been really shown to be an issue that the vast majority of the British people do care about, particularly the Labour movement. So you have my and our gratitude. The new government will be judged based on certain criteria. The first criteria is their own promises, and they have promised a lot vis-a-vis Palestine, vis-a-vis the Middle East, vis-a-vis foreign policy. And we all know their promises. They want to see an immediate and permanent ceasefire. They want to see an exchange of hostages from both sides. They want to see humanitarian aid and access that is unfettered. And they want to see it urgently upscaled. They committed to state recognition, playing a bit with language, but they committed to state recognition. They offered this to the electorals, to the voters in advance. So they are voted on the basis of these promises. In terms of the state recognition, they committed to recognizing a Palestinian state as a contribution, their manifesto says, as a contribution to a renewed peace process, which results in a two-state solution with a safe, as they coined it, safe and secure Israel alongside a viable and sovereign state of Palestine. They continued, that is the Labour manifesto, that Palestinian statehood is the inalienable right of the Palestinian people. It's not a gift, they say, it's not a favor. And Labour says that Israel cannot have a veto on this inalienable right, which we agree with. Israel does not, nor Washington, by the way, nor the US or anybody for that matter. This is a birthright. And Labour also said that Israel cannot have a veto power on any inalienable right of the Palestinian people. We agree, including the right of return, by the way. These are not rights up for negotiations. These are rights only to be discussed about the modalities of how do we achieve the right. However, they add that recognition has to be at the right time in the process, because they said we need a viable Palestinian state alongside a safe and secure Israel. And the Prime Minister Keir Starmer, added in Washington in first trip to the US for the NATO, he added that we don't have either of those, meaning neither a safe Israel nor a Palestinian state. And he said that therefore it has to be at the point of the process where we could see both of these outcomes, i.e. he wants to determine the timing of recognition. He doesn't want to do it the European style, the Spanish, the Irish, the Norwegian. He doesn't want to do it unilateral. He wants to do it at the right time. Now, I'm just listing for you what we have been hearing publicly. Of course, privately, it's a different matter, but this is the public sort of promises that we need to keep as a threshold. But a key part of their promise, the pillar of their promise, is their absolute waterproof respect to international law, international legality, the international judicial system, the independence of the ICC and the ICJ. We heard it from them in numerous occasions, in public statements, official statements, and in private conversations. So there is another criteria that we need to keep in mind and in heart, which is the labor movement, the labor values, the values of freedom, the values of social justice and political justice. These values are very important. And I have had the privilege of engaging, involving, interacting with the labor movement, and I make the difference, the distinction between the movement and the party. And you are part of the movement here. And the labor movement is absolutely in line with the actual and the true values of labor. So another criteria is the labor movement and the values of the Labor Party. And you all know these values. It's written over the years, and it is a deep convictions by the members of this movement. Thirdly, is the British public, the British people. I mean, I am absolutely heartened to see the overwhelming support of the British public towards Palestine, towards Palestinian rights in the last 9 months, but over the years, but particularly in the last 9 months. From the second week of the genocide, there was more than 70% of the British people who wanted their government to call and act for an immediate and permanent ceasefire. The same numbers, even higher, goes to 2/3, goes to 80%. When they are asked about should the UK impose an arms embargo, the majority say yes. When they're asked if the UK should recognize the state of Palestine immediately, the majority say yes. So another criteria is what the British people want, not just the labor movement and not just the labor voters, what the British people want. And finally, is this commitment to internationalism that I have heard from the new Foreign Secretary and from the Prime Minister and others. Now, my good friend Andy has just outlined what is expected from the British government. And I don't need to repeat what is happening in Gaza as we speak. You all know it, my friends. This is a classic case of genocide. And it's not up to me or to anybody to decide this. This is up to the highest court of the globe, that is the ICJ, that has accepted South Africa's case against Israel for committing the act of genocide, the mother of all crimes. And now Israel is officially on trial for genocide. So you all know the numbers and the statistics and how many have lost their lives because of this act of genocide and the utter destruction that has been inflicted on Gaza, not just on lives, but on livelihoods in all sectors. I mean, all sectors. 70% of homes in Gaza, of houses destroyed, 80% of schools bombed, 90% of hospitals decimated, 100% of universities bombed. So the target of the lives and the livelihoods is clear. And it's clear what's the intention. The intention is to turn Gaza unlivable. The issue is what the new government, the question is what the new government and how they can do to go about it. And here I think there are the following items and arenas that must be our list to guide us on what can be done. The first is to act for a ceasefire, not just to call for a ceasefire. You know, it's almost like automatic, like checking a box. We call for a ceasefire. No. You are a major international player. You don't just call for a ceasefire, particularly after the vote of the UN Security Council resolution. You have available for you many options to enforce a ceasefire as per the provisions of international law, as per the mandate of the UN Security Council, which the UK is a permanent member of. The second is departing from this talk about humanitarian situation, because Israel is using food and disease as weapons of war. The situation in Gaza is completely unbearable. I cannot have the words to describe what is happening because I have family members there and I know what is happening to them. And you all have seen, many here in London tells me, officials, ministers, for the last 9 months. Oh, Israel doesn't have a plan, and we are really upset that Israel lacks a clear military plan or political plan. And I always tell them, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Israel has a plan, and they have executed their plan almost to perfection. And the plan is to turn Gaza unlivable, lifeless. And the actual eventual plan is to push whatever left of the Gaza people out of the homeland, as they did in 1948. It's a repeat. So don't tell me they don't have a plan. Why are they targeting bakeries? Why they have destroyed all of the water pipes and the sanitation system? Why they have targeted the sewage system? It's obvious that they want no one to return to the north, and then when they are back to the north, they send them back to the south, and this whole thing waiting for a moment. And therefore, we need to take action rather than call for unfettered humanitarian action. And we need to start the reconstruction effort and preparing for it. And we don't see much action here. That's number two. Number three, and by the way, in the humanitarian side, and we are having this discussion, the best organization that could help in the elevation of this unprecedented human suffering is UNRWA. And I may have good news to share, but I'll wait for them to do so. But I believe that the government is going to commit to refunding UNRWA, which is a very good step in the right direction. So we start with what we have to elevate this unprecedented human suffering. Number three is accountability. Accountability is very, very key here. It's very key. I mean, it's not just for delivering justice for the Palestinian victims, which is important, crucial, but it is for deterrence. We want to make sure that this will never, ever happen again. It's our never again moment. And never again is not for the few, it's for everybody. And the best, most effective, most humane, most legal way to do so, the deterrence, is international judicial system. That's why we established the international courts. That's exactly why we did it, collectively. And it's really mind-boggling when the prosecutor general of the ICC on a CNN interview says that one of the major Western leaders told him that, what are you doing? The ICC has been created for Africa and Russia. And seriously? I mean, seriously? The ICC was created to make sure that war crimes committed anywhere in the world will be punished. All those war criminals will be held to account. That's the very idea of law, of the rule of law, whereby it is applied equally. So accountability is a major, major thing. In my opinion, it is the major thing. Because if we don't do this, if we don't allow our international judicial system to take its duty and do and deliver accountability and justice, I tell you, we are all of us are sitting ducks. It will be repeated again in Gaza. It will be repeated again somewhere else. It might be repeated even far, far from Palestine, including in Europe. And there is a war almost at the borders of Europe right now. So we want to make sure that rules are, are followed, and when they are violated. Number 4 or 5, I lost count, Jess, you might want to remind me, is the arms embargo. This is a legal matter, not only a political matter. When a country is officially on trial for genocide, the first thing you do, you stop providing it with weapons. It doesn't take an argument. And the new government has promised that they will release the IHL report once in government, and they will not conceal or hide any of these reports. And the first real test is coming about the ICC and about the IHL report. ICC, you all know that the previous government intervened just a week before elections, trying to obstruct the course of the courts, you know, the ICC process of issuing arrest warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant under a lousy legal pretext that Palestine does not have jurisdiction over Israeli citizens. I mean, our lawyers have the answer for this. We do in the land of Palestine. We do, even according to the interim agreements, we do. And even if we don't, and that's not true, international laws supersede such interim agreements, and the court has already delivered its verdict a few years ago that there is full jurisdiction of the court on the territory of the State of Palestine, because the State of Palestine did ratify the Rome Statute and did seek the ICC investigation of any war crimes committed by anybody in the territory of the occupied State of Palestine. Now, two major thresholds are approaching very fast. The first is the ICC and that intervention and what the new government is going to do. So we need to be following that. The very logical outcome is that the new government will simply reverse that and not submit. And I hope in this very arena, they will do the right thing, because this is a litmus test. I mean, if they budge here, I'll tell you, don't expect anything else, because that was the most clear commitment of theirs, the independence of the international courts. If they blink, not blinking, just I'm saying blink. If they blink here, I think you're going to see a lot of blinking. And I'm not insinuating here anything. So we hope they will take the right decision. The second major thing is the IHL report, which should be released by the Foreign Office at the end of this month. At the end of this month is the conclusion of another cycle of legal assessment by the Foreign Office and the experts. And the new government has promised during the elections and before it that they will release the IHL report. And you all know that David Lammy has released many statements calling on the government to release it, and that they will release it if in the government. Let's see at the end of this month what they will do. Now, early indicators are rather, in the mix. So the visit of the Foreign Secretary David Lammy to Palestine and to Israel was good in terms of it delivering a message that this government considers that issue, that cause, that region to be a priority. That was good. That was very good. And we needed such a message to be delivered at this point in time. So we welcomed it, we arranged it, and the Foreign Secretary was warmly received in Palestine, as he should be. Yet we thought that it could have gone a bit further, especially the part inside Israel, where the genocide is being committed and where this government is responsible. And, one was hoping that the discourse and the narrative would have been clearer, not just calling for a ceasefire, because, everybody's calling for a ceasefire now. What we needed to see is clarity, leadership, statesmanship, clear talk about the importance of international law and the consequences of not committing to and adhering to international law. However, that first experience, that first visit might be just a first visit, and we'll wait and see. I personally was hoping for more clarity and more vision to be conveyed, but the symbolism of it being among the first visits the Foreign Secretary does outside of the European or Western Hemisphere is important. Overall, my friends, we just need to make sure that the new government does not bring us back in time. That's the key thing. Doesn't go back to the status quo ante. Doesn't adopt a 30-year-old framework, which was called the peace process, which has led us exactly where we are now, has led us to a genocide. We need to make sure that this government will help. It's a labor government, will help in ushering a new framework, a new venue, a new track, a new path, a new direction, whereby it is not just about, an occupier and an occupied sitting around the table and trying to sort out something. This is not a disagreement. This is a case of military, colonial occupation that has lasted for decades. This is an issue of liberation and rights. We need to see the new labor government adopting these words and these terminologies and these rights, and following it with action. And I have to admit that the one thing that makes me feel slightly reassured is when I hear the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, says stuff about rights, that this is an inalienable right of the Palestinian people. This is no gift. This is no favor. This is the kind of things we need to talk about. As for the recognition of the State of Palestine, and I hear a lot of conversations here, it's crucial. It's paramount. for the following reasons. The first, it's historic. I mean, it is historic because it all started here, my friends. You all know that, the Balfour Declaration. And it is, in a way, it's correcting history. In a way, it's a statement, it's a recognition by the UK that the attempt to cancel the Palestinian people 107 years ago during the British colonial era has failed. The attempt to cancel us has failed because that declaration, that Balfour Declaration has canceled us, has turned us into non-Jewish minorities when we were the natives, the vast majority, 98%, owning 96%, the cradle of civilization, the hub between East and West, the birthplace of Christianity, and what have you. So that colonial arrogance has got to be, treated and corrected. And this is the moment to correct it. So it has historic significance, but it has legal and political significance. It tackles the root cause of the issue because everybody is talking about everything else, but nobody is really focusing on the root cause of this issue. Gaza, October, and since then is the symptom. History did not begin there. History began here. And therefore, we need to make sure that we tackle the root cause. And the recognition tackles the root cause. We are talking about the end of occupation. The military occupation is the key issue that needs to be tackled. Thirdly, it levels the field. It levels the field because for 30 years, it's been Israel and the Palestinians. Israel and the Palestinians. The Palestinians are a group of individuals or something, and Israel is a state recognized by the UK, recognized by the rest of the world, and that was interpreted by Israel as a license to grab more land, and that's what happened. They have grabbed almost everything because of Israel and the Palestinians. We need to turn it from that to Israel and Palestine, and therefore the borders are well defined, the end game are very well defined, and therefore any negotiations in the future or talks or engagements or whatever you want to talk about, call it, any of that will be not about the principles, not about the tenets, but about the modalities. And lastly, it's clarity. It's clarity. We have had a lot of lip service. Oh, we are with two-state solution. Recognize the two states if you are with the two-state solution. It's enough giving me this lip service. We have 30 years is long enough. That's a generation. That's even more than 30 years. Started 40 years ago, and we came to the Western sort of consensus. But many people mix between. They think the two-state solution is a Palestinian demand. Let me say this, Hugh, in front of all of our friends. It isn't a Palestinian demand. The two-state solution is a Palestinian concession to ally ourselves with the so-called international consensus. Our national political platform before 1988, the PLO national platform before the political platform before 1988 was one democratic state for all of its citizens. So we went to the two-state solution thinking that that was the international consensus, and we want to ally ourselves with the international consensus and the international legitimacy. Anyway, so recognition is about clarity and seriousness. So all those who say, why should we do it? It's a bit difficult for the UK. Why should it be difficult? And take your cue from Israel. If Israel is so angry about it, so reactive about it, then it must be impactful. Then it must mean something, and it means a lot, because the heart of our issue is the cancellation, the attempt after another from 1917 and the Balfour Declaration to 1920 and the British Mandate to the 1948 and the Nakba and the expulsion, the ethnic cleansing of 2/3 of the Palestinian people, to the military occupation of 1967 that has seen the colonial expansion, another ethnic cleansing, the removal of many Palestinians, the theft of our land and resources, the enactment of an apartheid regime, all the way to now and the genocide, which is an act of extermination, as you all know. So our case is case of cancellation, and recognition is a major thing for us. So no one should undermine it or say that it's not effective. No, we seek it and we want it. And we call on all our friends to follow this, because this is a British, first and foremost, responsibility and obligation. And even if it's not going to liberate the state of Palestine, it's our right. And it has been long overdue. Now, I'm going to conclude here by saying that how much do I expect from the new government, and how much We have open door policies with them. We are engaging them at the highest level. We will continue to do so. We have hopes, we have inspirations, we have aspirations, we have friendships. However, I think that will be answered by how much we can make sure that they have the right advice, they have the right whispering, not the wrong one. They have the constructive pressure from all the bases I listed, including the labor movement, Hugh, and the labor, the trade unions, and all of our friends there, from the British public, from the various institutions. It's not going to be automatic. If it's automatic, I fear that they might not want to invest much in terms of political capital. So we need to do work. We need to continue the engagement. We need to make sure that this new government does what it has promised, which is change. And I think we Palestinians are in need of a change in the arena of an ethical foreign policy. When I was a student in my 20s, I arrived to this country in the late 90s, and the foreign secretary was Robin Cook, if you remember that great man. He was a Labour foreign secretary, and he has introduced the concept of ethical foreign policy. I think that's the Labour we aspire towards, and that's the foreign policy we want to see, which includes Palestine. And we want to see Labour doing this not just for Palestine, doing this all over the world. We want to see the UK a minaret and a source of hope and a direction and a compass towards internationalism and the respect of international law and the respect of the very basic universal values. Thank you, Jess.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Thank you for taking the time today to speak to us, and for those very, very clear actions and calls to the Labour government to deliver, and something for us as Labour members and Palestinian solidarity activists to take away and continue to push for and continue to lobby for. And as you said, it's about actions, it's not about lip service. And I think that your message about accountability and the rule of law, surely two demands that Starmer himself should be striving to embrace as the leader of the Labour government and as an ex-human rights lawyer. And so we need to keep the pressure on. Those of us who've been in Labour for a while, I suspect most of us here know that it's our members and it's the public who have been driving the change in the Labour leadership's position, but we need to keep driving for Labour to be stronger on these issues. And now that they're empowered to deliver for Palestine and for humanity. So thank you so much for that incredible contribution. I think a lot of the questions that we've had coming in have been kind of addressed by your address there. So thank you very much. Before I take us to our kind of next section of the talk, I just want to give a shout out to some of the people who are joining us. There's hundreds of you joining. I think it's over 400 now. I'm seeing people from Hull, from Hackney, from Norwich, from Manchester, Derby, Leeds, Vauxhall, Peterborough, Edinburgh, Brighton, Warrington, Birmingham. I could keep going. Haringey, Winchester, many, many more places. Thank you so much, everybody who has joined us today. Before I take us to our final speaker, we have a quick call to action from Fraser from Labour and Palestine and Arise Festival, who have organised today's talk. So quickly over to you, Fraser.
Thanks very much, Jess. So my name's Fraser. I'm volunteer with Labour and Palestine and Arise Festival. And I've also been really involved in my community and in my trade union with Palestine campaigning. I just want to start by saying a huge thank you to everyone for attending this really important and timely event. Like Jess has said, there's over 400 people watching this right now across social media. And to me, that really highlights how crucial events like this are for our movement, not only because we're getting to hear from fantastic, knowledgeable speakers and bringing together activists and campaigners, but because of what happens when we go away from an event like this, feeling more inspired, feeling these call to arms. I think that is why this political space is just so vital for us. But on that, events like this really aren't cheap, and the impacts of them are so big that it's really important we're able to keep these going. An event like this tonight can cost up to £300 with the digital and streaming equipment. So one of the other volunteers is going to post a digital donation link down in the chat below, which would be really fantastic if you could donate, if you're able to. Anything you could donate, £10 or £20, will really go a long way, because without events like this, our movement would only be weaker. And the work Arise does with these is absolutely fantastic. Our other call to action, which is absolutely vital for everyone who's watching this to get involved with, is the petition, the link which is also going to be posted. That's petition by Action Network being pushed by Labour and Palestine. And that's a call on this new government for an arms embargo on, arms sales to Israel, because we need to be doing absolutely everything we can to put pressure to end the genocide. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and please follow up with those links. Cheers.
Thanks very much for that, Fraser. As Fraser said, please take the action, sign the petition. Everything you do is contributing to keeping this as a priority for the Labour government, and making sure that we address this urgently. I'm going to take us to our final speaker. So we have a few words on next steps from someone who I'm sure many of you have seen at these events before, as Hugh Lanning, co-founder of Labour and Palestine. Over to you, Hugh.
Thank you, Jess, and thank you to Andy and particularly the Ambassador Husam Zomlot for clear contributions about what we should be doing. And it's not accidental that we've put the Palestinian voice central to this discussion, because it's very easy, I think, for us to be waylaid by views and our own personal feelings. And I think we need to be very clear that what we are going to do and press for is what we hear from the Palestinians, what they want. Not what I want, not what the person in the pub wants, it's what the Palestinians want. And I think Husam gave us a very clear agenda for us to seek to follow. The other point of having an early discussion is that the role of Labour in Palestine, I think, is not to try and reinvent the wheel. It was a lesson I learned when I used to be able to go to Palestine. It was the Palestinians are saying, it's great that you come and see us and then you give us solidarity, but what are you doing in your country to make a difference in your country? And I think our focus as Labour Party members and as Labour in Palestine needs to be on that. And so to try and answer the question, what should the new government do? Well, as we've heard, the list is almost endless. There's so many things that could be done. There's the UNRWA funding, there's stopping the Tory application to the ICC for their intervention, there's a ceasefire, recognition, settlement goods, settlement violence, and so on. And Husam referred to our historic role. It would be great if there was an acknowledgement that we started this process and we've got a responsibility to try and end it. But I want to suggest actually that there is one clear paradigm shift or step change that we need to do and that we need to be focusing on in this country as Labour Party members. And I think that is us focusing on trying to end Israel's impunity. For 75 years, they've been able to do whatever they like and get away with it and know that there'll be no consequences, that nothing will happen. And the tone of David Lammy's statement in Israel and Palestine was good, much better. He touched some of the right issues that need to be resolved, and we look forward to seeing what's going to be done. But in that statement and in all previous UK government statements, there have never been any ifs or buts. There's nothing about what happens if there is no ceasefire. There's nothing about what happens if their attacks on Rafah and in Gaza carry on. There's nothing about what happens if the aid is not let through. Then are never any consequences. And I think that's what Husam was relating to. And I think it's a critical litmus test line that Labour has got to cross. At some point, if Israel continues to breach international law, we need to be saying that things won't carry on the same. And I think there's an obvious focus for that, and that is arms and the arms trade. Israel's economy is a military economy. It relies on military aid and military support for things to happen. But the ICC and the ICJ have given very clear evidence about how the arms and the military aid and support are being used or abused. And we see it on the television night after night. So I think an immediate arms embargo should be a clear focus for our activity. It has public and member support within the Labour Party. It has union support. And it should be, I think, where we start to win back the trust that Labour means business and is not just words. That's why Labour in Palestine has launched a petition to Starmer and Lamy, and we urge you not just to sign it, but to get as many people as you can and to circulate to get that petition signed. Because we know that supporters of Israel, as they have done with every other new party in government, will already be trying to shepherd new MPs into their camp and saying that you can't criticise or do anything that is not supportive of Israel. And what our challenge is to raise the issue. I think raise the issue of arms, raise the issue of consequences within our CLPs, with our MPs. There are all these new MPs there who need to hear our voices challenging them about what they're going to do. The actions nationally and locally have been amazing on the streets of London and virtually all of the places that Jess were mentioning around the country. Undoubtedly, they'll continue, and we need to carry on supporting them. But the general election gives us a new opportunity, I think, to try and make Palestine and Gaza an issue again within the party. I think the public spoke in the election. It was clear to every candidate that Gaza and Palestine was an issue. And we need to try and ensure that Labour listens to that and that we amplify that voice, the Palestinian voice. So as I said before, many people have ideas about what can be done. Lots of people try and use and abuse the issue of Palestine for their own political ends. But as a supporter of Palestine, we need to listen to what Husam and the Palestinians have said they want us to do and follow their need. And therefore, our task, I think, is quite straightforward. Really, the word in our families, in our parties, in our pubs, in our football teams, wherever it happens to be that we're active, we need to be raising the issue, as so many have done. But also, we need to make a difference. There needs to be a double whammy. Outside Parliament, inside Parliament, outside the party, within the party, a pincer movement in support of Palestine to make sure that there are consequences, that Israel is no longer left to act with impunity in breach of international law. And so long as it remains in breach of international law, the world will start to act. And actually, the world, the majority of it, already wants to. It is the West and the US and its allies who are stopping that happening. So let's try and make sure that we get the Labour Party to shift to being supportive of the oppressor and supportive of the oppressed, and make sure they start taking action to make sure there are consequences for Israel's action. And we in the Labour Party have a critical role to play in making sure we don't sit back now there's a Labour government. We actually are active within it, positively encouraging the Labour Party to take action to make sure we make a difference and that we move closer to a free Palestine and not just stay where we are. Thanks for attending. Please make sure you do something in your area, in your world, to take the issue forward. And thanks to our other speakers for having this debate so early on in the life of a Labour government.
Thank you so much, Hugh, for those really kind of practical reminders about our job as Labour members going forwards. And as we said earlier, also please sign petitions and keep taking actions. Thank you to all for coming and to all of our speakers. Thank you to the Labour and Palestine volunteers for organising, and of course Rise Festival volunteers for helping with the tech and hosting. Remember, as Labour movement activists who stand with Palestinian people internationally, our job here is to keep raising awareness of these issues, keep speaking up in solidarity with the people of Palestine, and stick to the streets in protest as well, of course, organising within our Labour movement spaces. This week, there will be a Hands Around Parliament event this Thursday at 6 p.m. We need thousands of you to turn up for this urgent act, an act of protest and an act of solidarity. So please show up for Palestine and remind our politicians that we are not going away and we will not slow down our actions while Palestinians in Gaza are still living under bombardment and denied safety, security, and dignity. I will see you there, whatever the weather. Please, once again, sign the Labour in Palestine petition to end arms sales to Israel. Try to pass the contemporary motion for Labour conference in your area and back MPs doing this work around the issue of Palestine and the King's speech. But that is all for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll see you on Thursday at the protest. Solidarity.